Sometimes the loneliest folks live in the biggest homes, and sometimes the toughest hearts hide behind the tallest walls. Back in 1880s Texas, a rich widow named Lucinda Hale had all the money could buy, but not what her heart really wanted. Then a big, hungry guy showed up at her gate, asking for just a meal if he could do some honest work. She fed him because she felt sorry for him. But what she got back was way more risky than she expected. Cade Mercer wasn't just any wanderer. He had a past that some bad folks would do anything to keep secret. When cattle thieves and old grudges threatened everything Lucinda had, her simple deal with a hungry cowboy turned into a fight to stay alive, find love, and make things right. Will the guy she helped end up helping her back? Before we dive back in, let us know where you're listening from. And if this story grabs you, hit that subscribe button because I've got something super cool for you tomorrow. The morning sun stretched long shadows over the Hale Ranch as Lucinda stood on her big porch, holding a coffee cup that warmed her hands even though it was already getting hot by 7. From here, she could see miles of rolling hills with mesquite trees, wide fields of golden grass that used to feed thousands of cows, and the twisty creek that named the nearby town. Dead Man's Creek got its spooky name from a cholera outbreak in '74, but the water still ran clear and cold, keeping what was left of her ranch going. She twisted the plain gold ring on her left finger, something she did without thinking since her husband Thomas died 3 years ago. The ring was loose now. She'd lost weight since becoming a widow, even though Rosa cooked enough food daily for a dozen workers. Lucinda couldn't take the ring off, even when friends said it might help her move on. The ring didn't hold her back. It held her together. At 28, she was young enough to marry again, pretty enough to have lots of guys chasing her from 3 counties. Her reddish hair glowed in the sunlight, and her green eyes showed she was smart, which scared off some guys. But looks and brains didn't mean much when her heart felt like stone. Thomas was her childhood love, her business buddy, her best friend, and her true love all in one amazing guy. When sickness took him, it took the best parts of her too. "Senora Lucinda, you gotta eat more than coffee," Rosa's voice came from the kitchen door. The Mexican woman had been with the family since before Lucinda's marriage, starting as a cook and becoming like a mom to her. Lucinda's real parents died in a stagecoach crash 2 years before Thomas, leaving her alone, except for the few people working her land. "I'll eat when I'm hungry, Rosa," Lucinda said, knowing she'd probably skip breakfast again. Food didn't taste good anymore. It was just something to keep her going while she tried to stay rich and independent in a world that made it tough for women. The Hale Ranch covered 15,000 acres of great grazing land, or it used to before the drought. 3 years without enough rain turned the grass thin and yellow. The creek was barely flowing, and many springs on her land dried up. Lucinda had to sell over half her cows, keeping only the ones for breeding, hoping for better days. Miguel Rodriguez came around the house, his worn face already worried. As her foreman, he worked hard to keep the ranch making money in tough times. He'd worked for Thomas since they were young, and his loyalty to the Hale family was stronger than family ties. "Morning, Senora," he said, taking off his hat. Like always when talking to her. "We lost another calf last night. Coyotes got through the fence again." Lucinda sighed, putting down her coffee cup harder than she meant to. Every loss hurt her wallet and her heart. Each animal was months of work, careful choices, and hope for the future. "How many this month?" she asked. 7, Miguel said grimly. "And that's just the ones we found. There might be more missing in the far fields." The ranch used to have 30 workers. Now it had only 8, Miguel, Rosa, and 6 loyal ranch hands who stayed even when pay wasn't always on time. They were good guys, hard workers who knew their fate was tied to hers. If the Hale Ranch failed, they'd all be jobless in a place where jobs were rare and competition was fierce. "Any word from Bartholomew Cross?" Lucinda asked, dreading the answer. Cross owned the ranch next door to the east and had been eyeing her land like a vulture since Thomas died. His offers to buy her out started nice, but got pushier over time. Last month, he suggested they could fix both their problems by getting married, hiding it as a romantic idea. "He rode by yesterday while you were in town," Miguel said carefully. Left another letter. Lucinda's jaw tightened. Cross never gave up. She'd give him that. He was good-looking in a cold, sneaky way, successful in business, and had no conscience about getting what he wanted. She'd heard about homesteaders who said no to his offers, only to lose their cows or have their water ruined. Nothing could be proven, but the pattern was clear to anyone watching. "I guess he's worried about my safety again," Lucinda said with a bitter laugh. "That's what he said," Miguel replied. "Also mentioned he heard talk in town about cattle thieves around here, thought you should know for your safety." The irony wasn't lost on them. Cross warning about thieves was like a fox warning chickens about weasels. Still, cattle theft was a real problem in the area. With so many ranchers struggling, some turned to stealing rather than letting their families starve. Lucinda couldn't fully blame them, even as she protected her own cows. "Double the night watch," she decided, "and tell the boys to shoot first and ask questions later if they catch anyone on our land after dark." Miguel nodded, liking her toughness. What about Cross's letter? Burn it with the others. The morning went on with talk of feed costs, moving cows to different fields, and fixing equipment they couldn't replace. Every choice was about money, how to spend less while keeping the ranch running. Lucinda was great at juggling funds, but even her tricks had limits. After Miguel left to start the day's work, Lucinda stayed on the porch, watching the sun rise over her struggling ranch. The house behind her was a reminder of better times. 3 stories of stone and fancy wood, with gabled windows and decorations that cost Thomas a lot. The furniture came from far-off places like New Orleans and Chicago, shipped at huge cost. Crystal chandeliers hung in rooms now empty most nights, and Persian rugs covered floors walked by just 3 people instead of the big family Thomas wanted. They'd planned for kids, lots of them, to fill the upstairs bedrooms and carry on the Hale name. But 3 miscarriages broke that dream, and then Thomas died before they could try again. Now the house felt like a tomb, pretty but cold and too quiet. The loneliness was heavier than she admitted. Dead Man's Creek was 20 miles away over rough roads, too far for casual visits. The few women she called friends stopped coming after she turned down their matchmaking tries too many times. They thought a woman alone was weird, something to fix or pity, but not fully trust. Her closest neighbor, besides Cross, was an old German man who barely spoke English and kept to himself. The next ranch was 40 miles north, owned by folks she hardly knew. In a place where neighbors were supposed to help each other, Lucinda had become like an island all alone. She picked up Cross's latest letter from the table by her chair, not bothering to open it. She could guess what it said. Another offer to buy her land, another dinner invite, another hint that a woman shouldn't run a ranch alone. He wasn't totally wrong about the challenges, but his answers all meant her giving up the freedom she'd fought so hard to keep. The morning breeze smelled of dust and dying grass, mixed with the distant mooing of cows. This land had been Thomas's family's for 2 generations, built through hard work, smart choices, and some luck. His grandpa claimed the first homestead when Texas was its own country, and his dad grew it through smart buys and marriages. Thomas doubled it again, making an empire that should have lasted forever. Now it was all on the edge, depending on one woman who never planned to run a ranch but had no choice. Some days, Lucinda felt up to the challenge. Other days, like today, the weight of it all felt like it could crush her spirit. She finished her coffee and got up to start the day's work, tucking Cross's letter into her skirt pocket without reading it. There were books to check, letters to answer, and a dozen small problems needing her attention. The work never stopped, but it kept her mind busy and her hands moving, giving her less time to think about what she'd lost and what she might lose next. As she turned to the house, she saw her reflection in the window. She still looked like the girl Thomas married, just thinner, with worry lines around her eyes. Inside, she felt old, worn out by duties and sorrows that aged her heart way beyond her years. The girl Thomas loved believed in fairy tales and happy endings. The woman in the glass knew life was about holding on, protecting what little you had, and hoping it was enough for whatever came next. She'd built walls around her heart, Not to be mean, but because she had to. Another loss like Thomas would break her completely, and too many people needed her to let that happen. But as she walked into her big, empty house, a tiny voice in her mind wondered what it would feel like to really live again. She'd gotten so used to just surviving that she'd almost forgotten what living meant. Almost, but not quite. And maybe that small difference would turn out to be more important than she could imagine. The afternoon sun was brutal as Lucinda rode her horse, Duchess, along the south pasture's fence. The heat made the ground shimmer, and far-off hills looked like they were dancing. She started checking the fences herself instead of just trusting Miguel's reports. Seeing problems up close helped her make better choices, even if they seemed impossible to fix. The fence posts leaned over, worn by wind and time. Some wires had snapped where thirsty cows pushed for better grass. Each broken wire meant more money she didn't have, another job for her tired workers. Lucinda got off her horse to check a bad spot, feeling the twisted wire and thinking about repair costs. That's when she saw him, a dark shape moving through the wavy heat, too far to see clearly. As he got closer, walking with a steady step like he'd walked miles, she saw how big he was. He was over 6 feet tall, with wide shoulders that could block the sun, looking strong but worn out. His clothes told a story of tough times, a once nice shirt torn and dirty, pants thin at the knees, and boots worn out from too many steps. His hat was old but good quality, like something a rich man might have worn before things went bad. Lucinda got back on Duchess, her hand going to the small gun in her saddlebag. A woman alone had to be careful, especially with a big stranger coming near. But something about him made her pause. He wasn't sneaking or hiding. He walked straight toward her like he had real business. At 50 yards, he stopped and raised a hand to show he meant no harm. Even from there, she could see his cheeks were thin, his clothes loose, like he hadn't eaten well in a while. "Ma'am," he called, his voice deep and clear, sounding like an educated man. "I don't mean trouble. Can we talk?" Lucinda watched him for a long moment, thinking it over. Her gut said to ride away and send Miguel with armed men to handle him. But his stance, respectful, patient, desperate but not scary, made her curious. "Talk from there," she said, keeping her distance. "What do you want?" He took off his hat, showing messy brown hair and a face that looked tired and worn. His eyes were a bright pale blue like a winter sky, and they showed smarts and a kind of pride that hard times hadn't taken away. "I'm Cade Mercer," he said, his voice steady even though he looked exhausted. "I haven't eaten in 3 days, ma'am. I'm asking for a meal if I can do some honest work. I can fix fences, handle horses, or work with cows, whatever you need." His simple request surprised her. Most men who came to her ranch wanted something tricky, to buy her land or take advantage of her being a woman alone. This guy just wanted food and a chance to earn it. "You're far from anywhere, Mr. Mercer," she said. "How'd you end up walking across my land?" A quick shadow crossed his face, not fast enough to hide. "Lost my horse 2 days ago to a snake bite. Been walking since, looking for work or someone to trade food for labor." It sounded believable, but Lucinda felt there was more to it. His walk and talk hinted he'd once been someone important, not just a drifter. "I have men for ranch work," she said carefully. "I'm sure you do, ma'am," he replied. "But I see your fence needs fixing, and I bet there's more work than hands. I'm not asking for a handout, just a fair deal." His stomach growled loud enough for her to hear, and he blushed, embarrassed. Against her better sense, Lucinda got off her horse again. Something about him intrigued her. Maybe the mix of his clear need and his pride, or maybe she saw a bit of herself in someone beaten down by life. "Show me your hands," she ordered. He held them out, palms up. They were rough and scarred, tanned from years outside, but clean, with neat nails. Whoever he was, he cared about himself even in tough times. "You know horses?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Raised and trained them most my life." "Cows?" "I've worked plenty of cattle drives." Lucinda looked him over again, noticing details. His saddlebags were good leather, though worn, with silver buckles that looked expensive. His boots were well made, even if beat up. This man had known better days. "What happened to you, Mr. Mercer?" she asked softly. For a moment, he didn't answer, his blue eyes looking past her. "Made some enemies, ma'am," he said finally. "Sometimes doing right isn't enough if the wrong people don't like it." It wasn't clear, but it felt honest. Lucinda made a choice that surprised her. "Can you ride bareback?" "If I have to." "Then let's go to the house. You'll get your meal, and we'll see what work you can do." She gave him a stern look. "But listen, Mr. Mercer, I run a clean place. Any trouble, stealing, or bad behavior with my people, and you'll be walking again with nothing but your boots." "Understood, ma'am. You won't regret this. We'll see." As they headed to the ranch house, Lucinda on Duchess and Cade walking beside her, she kept glancing at him. There was a story here, for sure. Men didn't go from riches to begging without a reason, and everything about Cade hinted his fall was recent and big. His saddlebags looked heavy, maybe holding more than just clothes. She saw papers inside when the flaps moved, letters or documents, maybe. He guarded them carefully, adjusting the bags to keep them hidden. Miguel was in the yard when they arrived, his face darkening at the sight of a stranger with Lucinda. His hand went to his gun, and she saw questions in his eyes. "Miguel, this is Cade Mercer," she said before he could ask. "He's working for us for meals. Feed him, then find him work." "Señora," Miguel started, but her look stopped him. "We need help, and he needs work. Sometimes it's that simple." But she knew it wasn't simple at all. She'd let a mystery into her world, and mysteries often turned into trouble. Still, as she watched Cade set his bags in the porch shade and take off his hat respectfully, she didn't regret her choice. Maybe it was her loneliness, or maybe she saw her own desperation in his eyes. Either way, she'd decided to find out what kind of man he was, and whether her kindness would save them both or start problems she couldn't yet see. Rosa's reaction to Cade was instant. When Lucinda brought him to the kitchen, the older woman's motherly side took over. She tisked at his skinny look and started pulling out food, leftover beef, fresh bread, and a jar of peaches she'd saved for something special. "Sit," she ordered, pointing to a chair like she ran the whole house. "You look like a scarecrow the birds picked clean." Cade took off his hat and sat, but Lucinda noticed he waited for her nod before eating. His manners were perfect, even starving. He used his fork and knife right, chewed slowly, and thanked Rosa quietly between bites. This guy was raised well, taught manners that set gentlemen apart from regular workers. "Where you from, senor?" Rosa asked, bustling around the kitchen, already making more food. "Virginia originally," Cade said after swallowing carefully. "Been in Texas about 5 years. Long way from home," Lucinda said, watching his face. "Sometimes a man's gotta go far to find where he fits," he said smoothly. Miguel came to the door, looking skeptical at the scene. "Señora, can we talk?" Lucinda followed him to the back porch where they could speak privately, but still see Cade through the window. "You don't know this guy," Miguel said straight out. "He could be a thief or worse. He could also be just what he seems, a guy down on his luck who'll work for food," Lucinda said. "Men like that don't carry fancy saddlebags or talk like they went to school," Miguel pointed out. He was right, but it only backed up what Lucinda already noticed. "So he's had better days. That doesn't make him bad. Doesn't make him safe either," Miguel said seriously. "Rustlers are hitting this area. What better way to check out our ranch than getting hired as help?" It was a fair worry, but something in Lucinda pushed back. Maybe it was because she'd been judged unfairly herself as a woman running a ranch. She'd faced doubts about her skills since Thomas died. Maybe she just saw a guy life had knocked down, trying to get up. Give him a chance, she decided. Put him on work where he can't cause trouble, like fixing fences in the south pasture. If he's scouting for rustlers, fixing our fences won't help them. Miguel didn't like it, but nodded. What about where he sleeps? I don't want a stranger in the bunkhouse. The old line shack by the creek is still there. He can stay there till we know more. When they went back to the kitchen, Cade had finished eating and was helping Rosa clear dishes, even though she told him not to. The small kindness said good things about him, though Lucinda reminded herself charm could hide bad intentions. "Mr. Mercer," she said, and he turned to her like a soldier facing his boss. Another clue to tuck away. "Miguel will show you what needs doing. Start with fences in the south pasture. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the chance. There's an old shack by the creek for sleeping. It's not fancy, but it's dry. That's plenty, thank you. As Miguel took Cade to get tools and explain the work, Lucinda watched from the kitchen window. Cade walked with purpose, not like a man who'd been walking for days without food. When Miguel handed him a tool, he held it like he'd used it 100 times. He's got good hands, Rosa said, joining her at the window. And he said please and thank you for everything. A man who's polite when he's starving. That says something about how he was raised. It says something, Lucinda agreed. But what? For the rest of the day, she found reasons to ride by the south pasture, checking other ranch work but really watching Cade. What she saw was impressive but confusing. He worked fast, like he'd done this forever, setting posts straight and stretching wire like he knew bad work would cause bigger problems later. He didn't just fix the worst breaks. He checked the whole fence and replaced the weakest parts first. It was smart. Like someone who planned ahead, not just fixed things after they broke. When Carlos, a young worker, brought water, Lucinda watched them talk. Cade thanked him politely and asked smart questions about the local cows, weather, and ranch problems. He seemed genuinely curious, not like he was fishing for bad reasons. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and purple, Cade cleaned his tools carefully before putting them away. That was a good sign. Men who cared for tools could usually be trusted with bigger jobs. How'd he do? Lucinda asked Miguel as they watched Cade head to the creek. Better than I thought, Miguel admitted, not happy about it. He knows ranch work, I'll give him that. Got more done in one afternoon than some guys do in 2 days. Any worries? Same ones I had before. A guy with his skills shouldn't be wandering begging for work. Something pushed him to it, and we need to know what. That evening, Lucinda sat on her porch with coffee, seeing a small fire glow near Cade's shack. He'd built it carefully, so it couldn't be seen from the main road, either sneaky or just smart about avoiding trouble. Rosa came out with a plate covered by a towel. I made extra biscuits, she said, but they both knew she made them for Cade. Someone should take them before they're cold. You're already acting like his mom, Lucinda teased. A hungry man's a hungry man, secrets or not, Rosa said. I see secrets in his eyes, but I don't think they're the kind that hurt good people. Lucinda walked to the creek with the biscuits, the night air cool with the smell of wood smoke and cows settling down. Cade was by his fire, staring into it like he was lost in old memories. Rosa thought you might be hungry, she said, holding out the plate. He stood quickly, surprised. That's kind. Please tell her thanks. Their hands touched briefly as he took the biscuits, and his were warm and clean, like he'd washed in the creek. You did good work today, she said, not sure why she felt like praising him. Felt good to be useful, he replied. Something in his voice made her look closer in the firelight. There was gratitude, but also relief, like he'd been lost for longer than he said. Mr. Mercer, she said carefully, Miguel's worried we don't know your past. To ease his mind, can you tell me more about where you're from? For a moment, she thought he'd dodge, but his shoulders sagged like he was tired of carrying a secret. I had a ranch 200 miles south, he said quietly. Not as big as yours, but good land. Built it from nothing over 10 years. Hard work. What happened? Sometimes doing right costs too much. His voice sounded heavy with old pain. I spoke against some bad men. They didn't like it and had more friends than me. It was vague but honest. So, you lost everything? Everything but what's in those saddlebags. He nodded. To the shack where his bags sat. Been wandering since? Looking for a place to start over without my past chasing me like a wolf? The image fit, explaining his careful ways. Whatever happened taught him trust was risky. Well, she said, tomorrow's another day and more fences need fixing. Get some rest, Mr. Mercer. Thank you, Mrs. Hale, for the food, the work, and not asking more than I can answer. As she walked back to the house, Lucinda thought about the Thomas Hale brand on her cows, a symbol of their legacy. That brand meant everything they'd built, and she was fighting to keep it alone. Looking at Cade, she saw a man who'd lost his own brand, his own legacy. Maybe that shared loss made her give him a chance when she should have sent him away. Or maybe she needed to believe people could start over because her own future felt shaky too. By the end of Cade's first week, he'd settled into a routine that even impressed Miguel. He got up before dawn, worked till sunset with short breaks for food, and spent evenings cleaning tools and planning the next day. The south pasture fence wasn't just fixed, it was stronger, ready for storms. Lucinda looked forward to their short talks during her rides. Cade had smart ideas about raising cows, managing water, and rotating fields, showing he really knew ranching. His suggestions saved her time and money, though he shared them shyly, like he wasn't sure he should. "The creek's too low for this time of year," he said one hot Thursday by the main watering hole, watching cows crowd in the seas. Shade. "I know, it's been bad for 3 years," Lucinda said, tired of the endless problem. "Ever thought about redirecting water from the north branch? There's a low spot half a mile up that could be blocked to make a pond. It'd hold water, even when the creek's dry." Lucinda looked where he pointed, seeing a chance she'd missed, despite knowing the land for years. That'd cost a lot. "Less than losing cows to thirst," he said. "Your men could do it with extra hours." She studied him. "You've thought about this a lot." He blushed. "I notice things, working the land every day. That's the kind of thinking that makes good ranches," she said. "Why not tell Miguel?" "Not my place," he said. "I'm just temporary help, not a partner." That night, Lucinda talked to Miguel about Cade's water idea over dinner. Miguel listened, asked practical questions, and admitted it was a good plan. "He's right about the benefits," he said, "but I still don't trust him. A guy that smart should have his own ranch, not work for scraps." "He said he lost his ranch," Lucinda replied. "Maybe he just wants a fresh start." "Maybe," Miguel said. "Or maybe he's here for reasons he's not saying." The next morning brought trouble that tested Miguel's doubts and showed more about Cade. Lucinda was checking her account books when Rosa rushed in, excited and scared. "Señora, come quick! Trouble with the horses!" Lucinda followed her to the main corral, where her prize stallion, Thunder, was rearing and kicking at anyone who got close. The big black horse was spooked and dangerous, a risk to himself and others. "He's been like this since sunrise," Miguel said, panting from trying to calm him. "Won't let anyone near, won't eat or drink. If we can't calm him, he'll hurt himself." Thunder was worth more than most men earned in 5 years, a breeding horse famous across Texas. But more than money, he was Thomas's last big buy, a symbol of their ranch's good days. "Should I get the rifle?" Carlos asked. "No," Lucinda said firmly. "There's gotta be another way." That's when Cade showed up, hearing the noise from his work by the creek. He looked at the scene and asked quietly, "May I?" Miguel started to argue, but Lucinda nodded. They'd tried everything, and Thunder was getting worse, risking death if it went on. Cade walked to the corral slowly, moving calmly so he wouldn't scare the horse more. He didn't try to go in or reach through the fence. He just stood there and started talking in a soft, steady voice that carried clearly. "Easy, big guy. Easy now. Nobody's gonna hurt you. You're safe with friends." The words were simple, but his tone, strong yet kind, seemed to reach Thunder. The horse's ears turned toward Cade, and his wild movements slowed to nervous pacing. "That's better," Cade said. "You're a great horse, a king of horses. Even kings need rest sometimes." As he talked, he pulled a pocket watch from his vest and let it swing, catching the sunlight. The shiny movement caught Thunder's eye, calming him more. Lucinda was amazed, not just by the watch, but by Cade. He'd gone from a quiet worker to someone who clearly knew horses deeply. It was like seeing a different person. After 20 minutes, Thunder was calm enough to eat oats from Cade's hand and drink water. The workers clapped, but Cade looked shy, putting away his watch and stepping back. "How'd you do that?" Lucinda asked, amazed. "Just patience and understanding," he said humbly. "Horses are like people. They act out when scared or confused. Show them you're not a threat, and they calm down." But Miguel saw something else. "That wasn't regular horse handling," he said to Lucinda quietly. "That was a pro, maybe even a cavalry officer." The thought stuck with her all day. That evening, she brought dinner leftovers to the shack, her curiosity stronger than her caution. "That was amazing with thunder," she said as Cade took the food. "Just did what needed doing," he replied. "Where'd you learn to handle horses like that?" For a moment she thought he'd dodge, but he decided to share. "My dad bred horses for the Confederate Army during the war," he said softly. "I grew up with some of the best horses in Virginia. After the war, when we lost everything, training horses was one skill that still paid. It explained his manners, his fancy speech, and his confidence. A Confederate horse breeder's son would have had a good education and status, only to lose it after the war." "The war ended 20 years ago," Lucinda said gently. "Some hurts take longer to heal," he said, his voice heavy with personal pain. As he spoke, he checked his pocket watch, and in the firelight, Lucinda saw an engraving, initials CM, and other letters that didn't quite match. "Nice watch," she said, hoping for more. "It was my dad's," he said carefully. "One of the few things I kept when I lost my ranch." But his tone hinted the story was bigger. The watch was fancy, a family heirloom, yet the initials didn't seem to fit the name he gave. As she walked back to the house, Lucinda wondered how much of Cade's story was true. He'd shared more tonight than ever, but she felt deeper secrets remained. A man who could calm a wild horse with just his voice and a watch was more than he seemed. The question was whether his hidden past was a danger to her ranch or just private pain from a heavy history. Either way, her small act of kindness was bringing complications she was just starting to understand. But as she got ready for bed, thinking about Cade's ideas for the ranch, she admitted complications weren't all bad. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she had a real partner in saving her ranch. Whether that would save her or ruin her was still unclear, but the loneliness of widowhood was fading, replaced by something that felt a lot like hope. 3. Weeks into Cade's work, the cattle thefts that had hit the area for months got worse. Lucinda lost 4 prime breeding cows in one night, stolen so cleanly there were hardly any tracks. The money loss was bad, but the feeling of being violated was worse. It was like an attack on everything she'd fought to keep. "They knew what they were taking," Miguel said grimly as they looked at the empty field. "Skipped the older cows and took only the young bulls and best heifers. Someone's been watching us, learning our habits." Cade stood quietly, studying, the ground like it was a book. When he spoke, his words were sharp and worrying. 4 men on horses with pack animals. Came from the east, worked fast, and knew exactly where to find the best cows. This wasn't random, it was planned. "How do you know all that from a few hoof prints?" Carlos asked, impressed. "The depth shows how many riders and if they carried extra weight. The spacing means they moved with purpose, not just wandering. And they came from the east, like they had a place to go." Miguel nodded darkly. "The east border is Cross's land." The hint was heavy, like smoke from a fire. Bartholomew Cross had been pushing Lucinda to sell for months, getting bolder as her money troubles grew. Stealing cattle was an old trick to force ranchers into giving up, especially when the stolen cows vanished without a trace. That afternoon, as if he knew they were talking about him, Cross showed up at the ranch with 2 men. Their horses were fresh, their gear fancy, everything about Cross showing off his wealth and power, from his silver-trimmed saddle to his pearl-handled guns. "Lucinda, my dear," he called as she came out to meet him. "Heard about your troubles? Cattle thieves. Terrible. A woman alone shouldn't face such dangers." Bartholomew Cross was good-looking in his early 40s, with silver in his dark hair and a confidence that came from never facing real trouble. His ranch was twice as big as hers and 3 times richer, built through smart deals and some shady moves. "Mr. Cross," Lucinda said coolly, not asking him to get off his horse. "What brings you here?" "Just neighborly worry," he said. "These thieves are hitting everyone. I've lost some cows too, but I've got enough men to guard my land properly." The dig was clear. Her ranch was weak because she couldn't afford enough help. "I appreciate your concern, but we're managing," she said. Cross smiled like he knew better. "Of course, my dear. But maybe it's time to think if struggling alone is best. My offer to buy your land is still good, and I'd raise it 10% because of your troubles. My land's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price, and prices drop when cows keep vanishing." His friendly tone hid a clear threat. That's when Cade walked up, carrying a saddle that needed fixing. He moved like he was just doing his job, but Lucinda saw his eyes take in Cross's group, their guns, their positions, their attitudes. Cross noticed him too, his eyes sharpening. "New worker, Lucinda? Thought you were cutting costs." "Mister, Mercer's helping with repairs," she said carefully. "Mercer," Cross repeated like he was tasting the name. "Don't know any Mercers around here. Where you from, friend?" Cade set down the saddle and stood tall, eye level with Cross, even though Cross was on a horse. "Here and there," he said evenly. "A man goes where work is." "And what work brings you to Mrs. Hale's ranch?" "Honest work." Cade's calm answer made Cross's men shift in their saddles. There was something about his stillness, like a snake ready to strike. Cross studied him, trying to figure him out. Finally, he turned back to Lucinda. "I won't keep you, but think about my offer. These are dangerous times for lonely ranches. It'd be sad if something happened that could have been stopped." After Cross left, Lucinda stood with Cade in the yard. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, and Miguel's voice carried as he gave orders to the workers. "He knows something about the thefts," Cade said quietly. "I think so too. But thinking and proving are different," Lucinda said. "Men like him don't do their own dirty work. They pay others to keep their hands clean." She looked at him sharply. "You sound like you've met his type before." "Once or twice," Cade said, his face blank. "Rich men who want what you have use the same tricks." That night, as Lucinda looked at her account books by lamplight, she thought about Cross's visit and his sneaky threats. Her books showed she could handle losing 4 cows, but not many more. If thefts kept up, she'd be broke in 6 months. Rosa came in with coffee and a worried look. "That Cross man gives me the creeps," she said. "He looks at you like you're a horse he wants to buy." "I'm not for sale, and neither is the ranch," Lucinda said. "Maybe, but desperate people sometimes make choices they wouldn't." "Normally," Rosa warned. It was true. Lucinda had sworn never to remarry, never to let a man control her life again. Thomas was her equal, her partner. Cross would want a wife who obeyed him, brought her land into his empire, and stepped aside while he ran it. The idea made her sick, but marrying him would solve her money problems. His wealth could cover theft losses, his connections could protect. Her and his business skills might save what Thomas built, even if she had no say. As she thought these dark thoughts, she saw a light by Cade's shack. Curious, she wrapped a shawl around her and walked out. Cade was by his fire, looking at a surveyor's map on a crate table. The map had symbols and lines marking property, water, and grazing spots. "Interesting map," she said, stepping up quietly. Cade looked surprised, maybe guilty, before his calm face returned. "Found it near the east fence," he said, but his tone hinted it wasn't an accident. "Thought you'd want to see it." Lucinda looked closer, and her heart sank. It was a detailed map of her land and nearby areas, with her property in red and notes about water, grazing, and entry points. The margins had numbers that looked like land values and cow counts. "This is Cross's work," she said, sure of it. "My guess too," Cade said. "The paper's fancy and the surveying's pro. Someone paid a lot for this. Why would he need this if he just wants to buy my land?" Cade studied the map. "Could be he's planning an offer you can't say no to. It's hard to bargain when the other guy knows your stuff better than you." The idea was scary. If Cross knew her finances, her cows, and her weak spots, he could time his pressure perfectly, hitting when she was most desperate. "There's more," Cade said, pointing to marks on her east border. "These look like planned routes to move cows off your land fast and quiet. You think he's stealing my cows? I think he's doing more than that. This took time and money. He's not just waiting for you to fail, he's making it happen." As they looked at the map, Lucinda noticed Cade's closeness. He smelled of wood smoke and leather, and when he leaned in, she felt his warmth. It had been a long time since she'd been near a man, and it felt strange but comforting. "What should I do?" she asked quietly. "Fight back," he said right away. "Men like Cross use fear and loneliness to win. Show him you won't budge and he might find an easier target." Easy to say when it's not your ranch at stake. Cade was quiet, then spoke with heavy experience. "Actually, Mrs. Hale, I know what it's like to lose everything bit by bit, and I know what it costs to give up without a fight. Sometimes you have to stand and face the odds. His tone made her look at him in the firelight, seeing not just a worker, but a man with his own scars. For the first time, she felt she was seeing the real Cade under his careful mask. "Will you help me?" she asked, bold despite herself. "Any way I can," he said without pause. "You gave me a chance when I needed it. I won't forget that." As they packed up the map, Lucinda hoped his loyalty was real. If Cross was trying to force her off her land, she'd need every friend she could get. The drought got worse over the next weeks. Dead Man's Creek turned to a muddy trickle and the springs dried up completely. Lucinda watched her cows crowd around the last water spots, getting skinny despite her efforts to feed them. "We'll have to sell more cows," Miguel said at their morning meeting. "Can't feed what we can't water?" The math was harsh but clear. Each drought day meant higher feed costs and lower cow prices as other ranchers faced the same tough choices. Cross's offer to buy was starting to look like a lifeline, even if she didn't trust him. Cade had been working on his water plan, leading the workers to dam the creek's north branch and make a small pond. It was hard work, moving tons of dirt and stone by hand, but it was starting to pay off. "It won't fix everything," he said by the new dam, "but it'll give us time to find other answers." Lucinda watched the water pool behind the dam, the first new water source in years. "You keep saying us," she noted. "This is temporary, remember? You'll move on when something better comes." Cade looked at the horizon. "Maybe I'm tired of moving. Maybe I found something worth staying for." The words hung like a question she wasn't ready to answer. Before she could, Carlos galloped up from the south pasture with bad news. "Señora, there's trouble. Someone stole 6 more cows and left something for you." What they left was a rough sign stuck in the ground. "Sell out or lose everything." It wasn't signed, but the message was clear. Someone was stepping up their game, from stealing to outright threats. "This isn't just theft anymore," Miguel said. "It's war." Cade checked the sign and ground carefully. "They wanted us to see this," he said. "Left clear tracks to Cross's land and made sure we'd find the sign. Either they're sloppy or they want us to react." "What kind of reaction?" Lucinda asked. "The kind that gives Cross a reason to hit harder. If you go to his land accusing him without proof, he can say you're the troublemaker, maybe get the sheriff to call you a crazy woman who can't handle ranch life." The plan was clever and confirmed Lucinda's fears that Cross was playing a smart game. He wasn't just stealing, he was pushing her to make mistakes that would let him win. That evening, Rosa came to Lucinda with a worried look and a torn paper. "I found this cleaning Mr. Mercer's clothes," she said quietly. "It fell from his shirt pocket, and I saw what it was." The paper was part of a larger sheet, ripped on 3 sides. It showed part of a man's face on a wanted poster, with strong features and sharp eyes that looked a lot like Cade's. Below it said, "Wanted for murder and assault. Reward $500. The rest was gone, torn or faded. Lucinda's hands shook as she looked at it. The face could be anyone's, but it felt like Cade. If it was him, it explained his secretive past, his hesitation to talk, and his skills with weapons and plans. "What do we do?" Rosa asked nervously. "Nothing yet," Lucinda said, her mind racing. "Don't tell anyone. I need to think." But thinking was hard when her mind kept circling the same scary questions. If Cade was wanted, what had he done? Was he a danger to her and her people? And worst, how much of what he'd told her was true? She couldn't sleep, pacing her room, trying to match the Cade she knew, hard-working, kind, protective, with the idea of a fugitive. Criminals could be charming to get what they wanted, and wanted men often made up fake stories to stay free. The thought that she'd been fooled made her feel silly and exposed. Near midnight, she made a risky choice. Putting on a robe, she walked to Cade's shack. He was by his fire, but not alone. Thunder, the stallion he'd calmed, was nearby, nuzzling his shoulder. Cade was talking to the horse in that same soft, kind voice. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, stepping into the firelight. Cade looked up, not surprised. Horses are good company when a man's got heavy thoughts. "What kind?" For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Thunder snorted and moved away, sensing tension. Then Cade pulled out the rest of the wanted poster from his pocket. I guess you're wondering about this, he said, holding it up so she could see. Lucinda's breath stopped. The full poster showed Cade's face clearly, with text that chilled her. Wanted for murder and assault. Cade McKinnon. Reward $500. Extremely dangerous. McKinnon, she whispered. Not Mercer. No, ma'am. Cade McKinnon's my real name. Mercer was my mom's maiden name. A good cover when I needed to hide. She stepped back, her hand going to her gun. You lied about everything. Not everything. Just the parts that'd get me shot or hanged before you knew the real me. And who's the real you? A murderer? Cade's face was serious, not defensive. I'm a guy who killed a man in self-defense. The dead man had powerful friends and they didn't want a fair trial. Tell me what happened. Short version. I saw a crooked sheriff take bribes from cattle thieves. When I tried to tell the truth in court, he and 2 deputies came to my ranch to shut me up for good. I killed the sheriff and hurt 1 deputy before they could kill me. The survivor lied, said I attacked them for no reason. It sounded true, but Lucinda knew to doubt easy stories from wanted men. Why should I believe you? Because you've seen me when I thought no one was watching. I could have stolen from you, hurt you, or used your situation, and I didn't. The guy you hired is the same guy here now, only my past is different. It was a strong point, but the poster was hard proof of danger. $500 is big money, she said. Someone thinks you're worth that much. Dead or alive, the fine print says. That shows they don't want a trial, just me gone. She studied his face in the firelight, looking for lies. Instead, she saw deep tiredness, like a man carrying a heavy load too long. If you're telling the truth, why stay here where someone might know you? Cade was quiet, then spoke softly. I'm tired of running. I found something here. Worth the risk. For the first time in 2 years, I feel like I'm building something, not just getting by. His words were like a bridge she could cross or burn. Hiding a wanted man could ruin her ranch. If the law caught Cade here, she could be arrested too. Her reputation, already shaky as a woman rancher, would be gone. But without Cade, she might lose the ranch anyway. His skills, hard work, and care had become key to fighting Cross. I need time to think, she said. I understand. And Mrs. Hale, whatever you decide, thanks for these weeks. It's been the closest to home I've had since I lost my ranch. She walked back. She saw Cade by his fire, holding the poster. Tomorrow would bring new troubles, new pressure from Cross, and new choices about trust in a world full of lies. But tonight, she didn't feel alone with her burdens for the first time since Thomas died. Whether that was smart or foolish was still unclear. A telegram came Tuesday morning, short and brutal like bad news always is. Sheriff William Hayes rode from Dead Man's Creek to deliver it, his old face serious. Morning, Lucinda, he said, getting off his horse slowly like his joints hurt. He'd been sheriff for 15 years and was close to Thomas, almost family. This isn't a friendly visit. Lucinda took the paper, her hands shaking a bit. She'd been expecting something like this since talking to Cade, but it still hit hard. Wanted man Cade McKinnon believed in your area. Stop. Extremely dangerous. Stop. Reward $500 dead or alive. Stop. Notify if seen. Stop. It was signed by a U.S. Marshal, Robert Dalton, from San Antonio. A handwritten note added, known to work with cattle thieves and killers. Do not try to catch alone. You know this McKinnon guy? Hayes asked, watching her closely. Lucinda forced herself to look calm. Should I? Word is he's working as a ranch hand around here, probably using a fake name. Could be risky for whoever hired him if they don't know who he is. Hayes's tone was casual, but Lucinda felt his suspicion. He was sharp, surviving 15 years by spotting lies. I'll watch out, she said carefully. With so many drifters looking for work, it's hard to know everyone's story. True, Hayes said. Mind if I look around, talk to your men, see if anyone fits the description? It wasn't really a question. Lucinda nodded, her mind racing to warn Cade without making Hayes more suspicious. Miguel can show you around, she offered. I need to check sick cows in the north pasture. Hayes nodded, but his gray eyes showed he wasn't fully buying her excuse to leave. Thanks, I'll keep this quick. As Lucinda saddled Duchess, her hands shaking, she heard Hayes asking Miguel about new hires. Miguel's answers were careful lies. Cade Mercer was a temporary worker, out fixing far fences back by evening. The lies came so easily, Lucinda wondered when she'd gotten okay with lying. 3 months ago, she'd have turned Cade in without question. Now, she was risking everything for a man she'd known less than 2 months. She rode fast to where Cade was working, pushing Duchess hard over rough ground. He was fixing a fence post, sweaty despite the cool morning. He looked up, and her face must have warned him because his posture changed. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Sheriff's here for you." She handed him the telegram, watching his face. His reaction was mixed. Resignation, anger, and deep tiredness from always looking back. "How long do I have?" "Not long. Hayes is talking to the men. Miguel said you're out till evening, but he's not dumb enough to believe that. If he wants you." Cade folded the telegram and gave it back. "Mrs. Hale, everything I told you about what happened is true. I killed a man, but it was him or me, and I'd do it again." "I believe you," she said, surprised by her own certainty. "Then you're either very smart or very foolish. I'm not sure which." "Me neither." She looked back at the ranch, seeing dust that likely meant Hayes was searching. "What'll you do?" "What I've done for 2 years. Disappear and start over. I'm good at it now." His casual tone hurt her heart. This man who'd worked so hard for her ranch, who'd been loyal and kind, was about to vanish as fast as he came. "There might be another way," she said. Cade looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "Bartholomew Cross. He's behind the thefts, the pressure to sell. What if we caught the real crooks? What if the law had bigger problems than your poster? That's vigilante justice. Not your fight. It's my fight since he started stealing my cows and threatening my life. If you're innocent, catching the real bad guys might clear your name." Cade thought it over, weighing the risks. "It's dangerous. Cross has money, connections, hired guns. Taking him on is like starting a war. Maybe it's time for a war. I'm tired of being pushed around, watching Thomas's work slip away while I play by rules that don't apply to men like Cross." Hoofbeats interrupted them. Sheriff Hayes appeared, riding straight for them like he'd found his target. "Too late to run," Cade said quietly. "Mrs. Hale, whatever happens, working here was the best part of my life in a long time. Don't let my trouble ruin what you're building." "Cade McKinnon," Hayes called from 50 yards. "Step away from Mrs. Hale and keep your hands where I can see them." Cade moved away, raising his hands calmly, showing no panic or fight. "Sheriff," he said respectfully as Hayes got closer, gun drawn. "I guess you're here about that poster. You're under arrest for murdering Sheriff Dan Cosner and trying to kill his deputies. You can stay quiet, but I'd talk if you want a jail cell instead of a coffin. The man I killed took bribes from cattle thieves," Cade said steadily. "I was ready to tell the court till he decided I needed to shut up for good." Hayes snorted. "That's what they all say. Cosner was a good man. Served 20 years. Then why'd he come to my ranch at night with 2 armed men instead of a proper warrant in daylight?" "Because you were dangerous." Looks like he was right. As Hayes moved to cuff Cade, Lucinda spoke before she could stop herself. "Sheriff, what if I said I have proof the real cattle thieves are still out there? What if the crimes Cade reported are still happening?" Hayes paused, looking at her. "What proof?" Lucinda thought of Cross's map, the pattern of thefts, and the threatening sign. None would hold up in court alone, but together they showed organized crime. "The kind that might interest a U.S. Marshal more than one wanted poster," she said carefully. "Listen, Lucinda," Hayes said sternly. "I know you're upset about stolen cows, but that doesn't mean you can hide a murderer. This man's dangerous and has been lying to you since he got here." "Has he?" "The man I hired has done honest work, improved my ranch, and shown more honor than some respectable folks." Hayes's face darkened. "You accusing me of something?" "I'm saying maybe the real crooks are the ones with money to avoid wanted posters, while men like Cade get chased for fighting corruption." It was a bold move that could make her an enemy of the law she needed. But watching Cade stand there, accepting his fate with dignity, she knew she'd chosen her side. Hayes cuffed Cade and led him away. Cade looked back once, his blue eyes meeting hers. In that moment, Lucinda decided to prove his innocence by exposing the real criminals, even if it meant taking on Cross and his whole operation. The scared widow who just survived was gone, replaced by a woman ready to fight for what she believed in. Cross's war against her was about to meet a battle he didn't expect. The jail in Deadman's Creek was a stone building, old and worn, with thick bars and walls that swallowed sound. Lucinda sat outside Cade's cell, having paid the deputy for a private talk. "You shouldn't be here," Cade said quietly, holding the bars. "Being seen with me will hurt your name more." "My name's the least of my worries," Lucinda said, leaning close to keep their talk secret. "I've been thinking about Cross and the thefts. What if we could prove he's behind it? What if we could show the corruption you saw reaches this county?" Cade looked doubtful. "Even if we could, what good would it do? I'm still wanted for murder, and Cross has enough pull to make accusations vanish." "Not if the proof is strong and goes to the right people," Lucinda said, pulling a paper from her bag. "I sent a telegram to the U.S. Marshal in Austin today saying I have info on organized cattle theft that might link to their cases." Cade looked at her with admiration and worry. "You're playing a risky game, Mrs. Hale. Cross won't like federal meddling. Then we better get enough proof to lock him up before he knows what's happening." Her voice was strong, surprising her. "Miguel's watching Cross's moves, tracking every theft, every visit to my ranch. Rosa's noting which cows are gone and when. I've been studying that map for patterns." "What did you find?" "Cross isn't stealing randomly. He's picking specific cows valuable for breeding. Someone with that map could plan thefts months ahead, knowing where to hit." Cade nodded grimly. "That's how big rustling rings work. They study ranches for months, learning routines and picking the best targets. But proving it means catching them in the act. Then that's what we'll do." Deputy Marshal James Crawford walked in, a lean man in his 40s with quiet confidence. Sheriff Hayes led him to the cell, looking unhappy about federal involvement. "Mr. McKinnon," Crawford said, "I've read your case file and have questions about Sheriff Cosner's death." "I'll answer anything," Cade said steadily. Crawford asked detailed questions, professional and thorough, caring about Cade's side rather than just the charges. "Mrs. Hale," Crawford said, turning to her, "Sheriff Hayes says you think there's ongoing crime here tied to McKinnon's case." "I do, and I have proof." For the next hour, Lucinda showed everything. Cross's map, the theft patterns, the threats, and the pressure to sell. Crawford listened, asked sharp questions, and took notes. "This is interesting but mostly circumstantial," he said. "To charge someone like Cross, with his money and connections, we need direct proof." "Like what?" Lucinda asked. "Witnesses to crimes, proof of planning between criminals, or physical evidence tying Cross to the thefts." Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "Deputy Marshal, with respect, Bartholomew Cross is a community leader. These claims come from a wanted killer and a stressed woman." Crawford's eyes tightened, noting Hayes's defense of Cross. "Still, Sheriff, these claims need looking into. Mrs. Hale, will you help gather more proof? Anything you need. It could be risky. If Cross is as bad as you say, he won't hesitate to remove threats." Lucinda thought of her father's Derringer, the small gun she got from him, along with his stubborn independence. "Deputy Marshal," she said quietly, "I've lost my husband, most of my cows, and almost everything else. I'm not losing what's left without a fight." Crawford nodded. "Then here's the plan. Mr. McKinnon stays in jail for now, but I'm holding off his trial until we investigate. Mrs. Hale, go back to your ranch and act normal. But watch everything. Every visit from Cross, every theft, every odd thing." "What about protection?" Cade asked, worried for her. "If Cross knows she's with federal marshals, he might decide she's too dangerous to live. I'll have men ready to move fast if needed," Crawford said. "But Mrs. Hale, you'll be like bait. Are you okay with that?" Lucinda thought of Thomas, their ranch dreams, the stolen cows, the threats, and Cade in jail for fighting corruption. "I'm ready," she said firmly. For 3 days, Lucinda dove into being a federal informant, tracking every suspicious event, visitor, and change in nearby ranchers' behavior. Miguel and Rosa helped, their loyalty more than just work. They cared about her safety. Miguel used his ties with other workers to learn about Cross's moves. while Rosa tracked everything at the ranch. "Senora," Rosa said on the third night, "someone's watching the house. I saw the same rider on the hills 3 times today, always far but not leaving. Cross is nervous," Miguel added. "He's asking in town about your meeting with the marshal. He knows something's up." That night, Lucinda sat on her porch with her father's derringer, watching the dark. Her dad gave her the gun at 16, teaching her to use it and saying, "A gun's like a promise. Don't draw it unless you're ready to use it, and don't use it unless someone's life is at stake." Tonight, she felt close to that line. Cross's spying meant he was planning something, not just another polite offer. Her fears came true the next morning when Cross arrived with 6 armed men, all looking dangerous, like hired guns. "Lucinda, my dear," he called as she stepped out. "I hear you've had some shady visitors, federal marshals, men asking about neighbors. I'm worried you're getting into things you don't understand." "I understand enough," Lucinda said. "Maybe, but I hear you're accusing honest folks of cattle theft. That's risky for a woman like you." His tone was friendly, but the threat was clear. His men spread out around the yard, blocking escape routes. "This wasn't a visit, it was a warning. I'm just helping the law," Lucinda said carefully. "You don't mind citizens catching criminals, do you?" "I mind wild claims from a wanted killer and a desperate woman who's lost touch with reality. Grief and money troubles can make people see things that aren't there." Miguel came from the barn, hand near his gun. Behind him, Carlos and 2 others took spots where they could fight if needed. They were outnumbered but knew the land and were fighting for something real. "Mr. Cross," Lucinda said, her voice steady despite the tension. "Time to leave my land." Cross's smile was cold. "Time to rethink your choices. Marshals can't protect you all the time, and accidents happen to lonely ranches more than you think." As Cross and his men left, Lucinda knew she'd crossed a point of no return. The war she'd started was about to get real, and it would decide if she'd survive and if justice could win against rich, powerful men. That evening, as she cleaned her derringer, she thought about her dad's words about promises. Tomorrow, she might have to keep that promise. The attack came at dawn, when the light was dim and most folks were just starting their day. Lucinda was in the kitchen with Rosa, sipping coffee and checking reports, when Miguel burst in, out of breath. "They're coming," he said. "Cross and at least a dozen men, maybe more. Moving fast like they mean to end this today." Lucinda's heart raced, but her voice stayed calm. "How long?" 20 minutes, maybe less. Coming from 3 sides to trap us." Rosa prayed in Spanish, but also grabbed rifles from Thomas's cabinet. "Send Carlos to town now," Lucinda said. "Tell him to find Deputy Marshal Crawford and report this. The rest of us hold them off as long as we can." "Senora," Miguel said carefully, "there's only 5 of us. Cross brought a small army. Then we fight a small war. This is my home. I won't be scared off." As Miguel set up defenses, Lucinda thought of Cade in jail, unable to help in the fight that would decide their fates. She'd promised to clear his name, but first, she had to survive to show their evidence. Hoofbeats grew louder, dust clouds rising as Cross's men moved in. "Mrs. Hale!" Cross called from the yard. "I'm here with Sheriff Hayes' authority to arrest you for hiding a fugitive and messing with the law. Come out now, and you'll be treated fair." It was a smart lie, making his attack seem legal while planning no witnesses to his crimes. But Lucinda knew the difference between law and justice, and doubted Cross meant for her to live to see a trial. "Show me your warrant," she called, stalling, as Miguel and the others got ready. "It's in my saddlebags," Cross said. "Come out with hands up and I'll show it." Instead, Lucinda went to a window with a clear view. Cross sat on his horse among his men, but he looked nervous, glancing east like he expected something. Then she saw another dust cloud, smaller but faster. Someone else was coming, and Cross didn't plan for it. The riders were Deputy Marshal Crawford and 3 federal agents, their horses tired from a night ride. They'd gotten Carlos's message and raced to the ranch. "Mr. Cross," Crawford called, his men surrounding Cross's group. "You're under arrest for cattle theft, threats, and planning murder." Cross's face went pale, then red with anger. "This is crazy. I'm here on official business, arresting a woman hiding fugitives and making false claims. The only false claims are in that fake warrant." Crawford said calmly. "We have proof tying you to cattle theft across the region, including plans found in your office last night." Cross reeled like he'd been hit. While he planned his attack, federal agents had searched his property and found what they needed to ruin him. "You have no right," he started, but Crawford cut him off. "We have every right and the proof, including this." He held up a leather journal Lucinda recognized as like Thomas's, but it wasn't his. "This is Sheriff Dan Cosner's journal," Crawford said. "Found in your safe, Mr. Cross. It lists bribes, theft plans, and orders to silence witnesses." Cross's men got nervous, some edging away, seeing the trap close. "It also says," Crawford went on, "Cosner, worried about a rancher, Cade McKinnon, who saw too much and needed to be stopped. It's clear Cosner and his deputies went to McKinnon's ranch to kill him, not arrest him. It was huge. If Cosner's journal proved Cade acted in self-defense, his charges were lies. The corruption went beyond theft to a whole network." "That's impossible," Cross said. "Cosner wouldn't keep records of crimes." "He didn't trust you to keep your deals," Crawford said dryly. "Insurance, you could say. Bad for you, it ended up with us." Lucinda watched from her window, heart pounding with hope and fear. Crawford's arrival saved her from a fight, but Cross's men were still armed and desperate. Her fears came true when Cross pulled his gun and shot at Crawford, the sound like thunder. Bullets flew, turning the arrest into a wild gunfight. "Get down!" Miguel yelled as windows broke from stray shots. Lucinda crouched, holding her derringer, ready to fight if Cross's men reached the house. The fight seemed endless, but lasted maybe 5 minutes. When it stopped, 4 of Cross's men were dead, 3 surrendered, and Cross was shot in the shoulder, cursing but alive. "It's over," Crawford called. "Mrs. Hale, you can come out. It's safe." Lucinda stepped out, seeing Crawford hold Cosner's journal like it was holy. It was more than evidence. It was proof justice could beat corruption, truth could survive. Most of all, it was Cade's freedom, the proof he'd sought for 2 years of running. The real crook was caught, not by fighting, but by his own words in a journal he never meant to share. Cross's questioning happened in the same jail where Cade was held, but it was different now. Cross sat in cuffs, shoulder bandaged, still, proud, refusing to talk about his crimes. "You've got nothing," he said, despite Crawford's evidence. "That journal could be fake, planted by your men. No jury will convict me on that." Crawford smiled grimly. "We have more than the journal. While you planned your attack on Mrs. Hale's ranch, my men talked to your old partners. People get chatty when facing federal charges." Over the next hour, Crawford broke Cross's denials with statements from caught rustlers, workers who saw shady stuff, and Cross's bookkeeper who tracked payments to crooked officials. "Your setup was smart," Crawford said. "Stealing cows from struggling ranchers, selling them through middlemen to other states, with local sheriffs paid to ignore it. You could have kept going if you hadn't gotten greedy." "I don't know what you mean," Cross said. "Then explain these." Crawford showed letters in Cross's handwriting, listing payments to officials and plans to take land through threats and theft. "Where'd you get those?" Cross asked, his cool breaking. "Your safe, with Cosner's journal. You both kept insurance in case your deal went bad." Lucinda watched from the hall, amazed at how fast Cross's power fell apart once the Edame feds pulled at the loose ends. The man who seemed untouchable was just a crook with fancy clothes and connections. "Mrs. Hale," Crawford said, stepping out. "We have enough to clear Mr. McKinnon. The evidence shows he acted in self-defense against corrupt men who meant to kill him. When will he be free?" "Within the hour. Charges are dropped, and I'll make sure his name is cleared across the territory." Sheriff Hayes appeared, looking grim, knowing his world was changing. Cosner's corruption implicated other officials, and Hayes was fighting to keep his job while feds checked his office. "Mrs. Hale," he said stiffly, "I'm sorry. I was wrong about McKinnon's guilt and your claims about Cross. Apology accepted, Sheriff. We all mess up without full info." Hayes looked relieved. "If I can help fix the damage to your ranch—" "There is something," Lucinda cut in. "I want a full look into every cattle theft here for the last 2 years. Every rancher who lost to Cross deserves justice and payback." "Of course. Whatever you need." An hour later, Cade walked out of his cell, A free man, charges gone, and name cleared. Lucinda waited in the sheriff's office, holding his hat. "Mrs. Hale," he said quietly, taking it with shaky hands. "I heard what you did, the risks you took to clear me. I can't thank you enough." "Don't try," she said, her voice emotional. "Just say you're staying. The ranch needs a good foreman, and you're the best for it." Cade's blue eyes searched hers, checking if she meant it. "You offering me a permanent job?" "I'm offering a partnership, half. The ranch equals, say, a chance to build something lasting." "That's generous, but I'm not sure." "It's not charity, Cade. It's business. I need someone I trust, who knows ranching and fights for what's right. You get a home, a future, and a share in our success." Before Cade could answer, Crawford came with big news. "Mr. McKinnon, Mrs. Hale, Cross is fully cooperating. He gave a written confession, naming every official he bribed and every crime he did." Crawford showed a long document in Cross's handwriting, signed boldly. It laid out years of corruption across the county and beyond. "Why'd he confess?" Lucinda asked. "He had nothing to gain." "Actually, he had everything," Crawford said. "Prosecutors were ready to push for hanging for his part in Cosner's murder plot. By confessing, he got 20 years in prison instead. It was rough, but fair. Cross would spend his best years locked up, his empire gone, his name ruined. The confession cleared any doubts about Cade's innocence or their evidence." As they left the jail, Lucinda thought about their journey. 3 months ago, she was a lonely widow, fighting to save Thomas's legacy against all odds. Now she stood with a man who'd become her partner, their enemies beaten, their future safe. "So," Cade said as they reached their horses. "Partners? Partners," she said, offering her hand. Instead, Cade kissed it gently, a sign of respect, thanks, and something deeper they weren't ready to name. "Then we'd better get back to the ranch," he said with his first real smile since they met. "We've got work to do, and I'm looking forward to it." As they rode home, Lucinda thought sometimes the best deals were ones you didn't see coming, like feeding a hungry stranger and finding that kindness could change both your lives in ways you never dreamed. 6 months later, the Hale Ranch, now called the Hale McKinnon Ranch, was one of the best in 3 counties. Cade's water pond not only survived the drought, but let them grow crops to help their cow income. The stolen cows were returned, and Cross's seized money helped rebuild their herd to its old size. Lucinda stood on the porch watching Cade work with new horses from San Antonio. His skill still amazed her, but she'd gotten used to finding new sides to the man she hired to fix fences, who ended up fixing her heart too. Their bond didn't grow fast. Trust, broken by lies and secrets, took time and steady work to rebuild. But working together to save the ranch, their partnership grew into something neither expected from their first deal. "Señora," Rosa called from the kitchen, "the priest is here for final plans." Father Miguel Santos, who married Lucinda and Thomas 8 years ago, was back, tying their past to their future. "How you feeling?" he asked as Lucinda joined him in the parlor, where Thomas's portrait hung. "Nervous," she admitted. "Happy, but nervous. That's normal," he said. "Second marriages need a different courage. The innocence is gone, replaced by wisdom from knowing how precious and fragile love is." Lucinda looked at Thomas's picture, searching for his approval or disapproval. She remembered his voice the night before he died, feverish but clear. "Promise me you won't live alone forever," he'd said. "Find someone who makes you happy, who deserves your love," she'd promised, thinking she'd never keep it. Thomas was her world, her partner in every dream. The idea of someone else taking his place was impossible. But Cade didn't try to replace Thomas. He built something new on what they'd started, honoring the past while making room for a new future. "I think he'd approve," Father Santos said, seeing her look. "Thomas wanted you happy. He wouldn't want his memory to trap you." The wedding was in the main room, with ranch hands and town friends who'd helped Lucinda through tough times. Deputy Marshal Crawford came from Austin as Cade's best man, bringing proof Cade's name was cleared. Miguel walked Lucinda down the aisle, proud as a father. Rosa cried openly, overjoyed to see Lucinda happy again. Cade stood at the altar in a new suit Rosa insisted on buying, looking like a gentleman, though Lucinda would have married him in work clothes. Their vows were traditional but personal. When Cade promised to love and honor her in good times and bad, Lucinda thought of the desperate man who asked for a meal. When she promised to stand by him through any trouble, she thought of the courage it took to trust his innocence when others saw a criminal. Their new rings were simple gold, unlike Thomas's ring of youthful dream. These symbolized a love that was complex, fragile, but strong through shared struggles. "By the power of Texas and God," Father Santos said, "I pronounce you husband and wife. Cade, kiss your bride." The kiss was soft, respectful, a promise of devotion, not ownership. When they parted, Lucinda saw wonder in Cade's eyes, matching her own at finding love when they'd both given up hope. The party was simple but warm, with